Hello everyone, it's the NFL Exporter, Lance Goodman, and I'd like to welcome you to the debut edition of the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show here on the DerekShapiroShow.com. Starting this week, the show will be airing each and every Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m. And if you happen to miss the show, we'll be re-airing it every Sunday at 2 p.m. You'll simply go to the DerekShapiroShow.com, look under archives where you'll be looking for the page that says NFL Exporter, as well as the current month that we're in. The show is very exciting. We're in the preseason now, so what I'm going to do is over the next 4 weeks, we're going to cover the AFC, we're going to cover the NFC, and then we're going to take 2 weeks to cover fantasy football. We'll look at the quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. Come back the following week with the tight ends, kickers, defense, special teams, and look forward to a great season of NFL as well as fantasy football. I certainly like to say hello to all of our viewers in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Los Angeles, California, Atlanta, Georgia, New York, as well as worldwide. You know, we're on the net. We have tons of viewers from all over the globe, but those are certainly the places that we consider home, where we have a lot of friends and the majority of our viewers. So we certainly like to welcome you to the show. I also like to give a big shout out and thank you to my good friend and business partner, Derek Shapiro, for bringing this all together. You guys make sure and check out my show as well as other great shows on DerekShapiroShow.com each and every week. All right, we're going to go to a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to go ahead and start discussing the AFC and take a look at each division, and also give our predictions as far as who we think is going to end up winning the conference and representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. Once again, it's the NFL Exporter, Lance Goodman. You're now tuned in to the Final Wrap on DerekShapiroShow.com. We'll be right back after these messages. All right, thanks for coming back to join us. You're now tuned in to the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show with your host, the NFL Exporter, Lance Goodman, here on DerekShapiroShow.com. As I mentioned today, we're going to cover the AFC Conference and the NFL, and let's go ahead and start breaking it down division by division. Certainly with our home base being in Massachusetts, Rhode Island area, we'll go ahead and start with the New England Patriots in the AFC East Division. The Patriots obviously are the cream of the crop of the division. Certainly can be considered the cream of the crop of the AFC. I know it's been since 2005 that the Patriots have actually won a Super Bowl, but they've won the division 10 straight years, 10 out of the last 11 years, and they have 5 AFC championship appearances during that stretch. So this is certainly a team that year in and year out with Coach Bill Belichick, Tom Brady at the helm, have certainly been able to keep a stable unit in place and put a winning product on the field each and every year. You certainly have to respect that. This year, I expect things to be no different. Last year, New England was still able to make it through to the AFC Championship game, and they had a plethora of injuries. This year, I certainly expect for them, if healthy, to be right back in the AFC Championship game again. On the offensive side of the football, we all know too well Mr. GQ covered himself, future Hall of Famer Tom Brady. Brady has at his disposal this year a very good running game. The Patriots certainly have an excellent offensive line. Guys like Logan Mankins, Nate Sauter, Brian Winters are certainly Pro Bowl caliber type linemen. Running the football this year will be Stephen Ridley. Ridley certainly is capable of picking up grounds on the yard. The one thing that he has to do is hold on to the football. The fumbles cost Ridley his starting spot down the stretch last year to the point where he was actually benched. And so as long as Ridley can hold on to the football, he's certainly capable of running for over 1,000 yards and will certainly be a guy who factors in as far as running the ball in the goal line. I really like Ridley a lot, just needs to protect the football. You have changes injured pace back Shane Vereen. Vereen is a great weapon that Tom Brady likes to use. If you recall, a couple years ago, Danny Woodhead was with the Patriots. He was kind of in that role as far as running the ball out of the shotgun, but also being a matchup nightmare for linebackers, and that's certainly what Vereen brings to the table. You see him coming out of the backfield. You see him lining up at wide receiver. You see him lining up at the slot. He's capable of running the ball as well. So Brady certainly has two good backs behind him, and we certainly can't factor out Brandon Bolden, a bruising running back. Bill Belichick likes to keep his players fresh, so I certainly like what the Patriots have to offer in the backfield. As far as the wide receiver position goes, if all his targets can hold in place, we know that Tom Brady is certainly one of the most pinpoint passers in the NFL. He'll have Danny Amendola. He'll have Julian Edelman. He'll have second-year guys Aaron Dobson and Kimbrell Tompkins. Both players struggled a tad bit in their first year, obviously having to make the adjustment and learn a complicated system in New England. Also struggled with injuries a little bit, but respectively Dobson with 6 and Tompkins with 8 touchdowns certainly were productive in their rookie seasons. You also add into the equation Brandon LaFell, a good receiver that they brought over from the Carolina Panthers. And then we all expect a healthy Rob Gronkowski back in the lineup, which we know he's one of the top players in the entire NFL. And so if that receiving core can stay healthy and the Patriots can run the ball effectively, this is certainly an offense that will be prolific and obviously in the top 5 to 7 scoring offenses in the league without question. On the defensive side of the football, New England got a whole lot better, and that's what you have to like about this organization. They're never content. Last year they suffered some pretty brutal injuries. All-pro defensive tackle Vince Warfolk went down with the injury fairly early. They lost Tommy Kelly, another big DT inside. Both of those players are returning. I certainly like what they have on the defensive end. Chandler Jones is a guy who's emerging as a big-time pass rushing threat coming from the defensive end position. And they were able to bring in Will Smith, a crafty veteran from the New Orleans Saints, won a Super Bowl ring with them a couple years ago. So I certainly like what the front four has to offer. The linebacking core is steady again. Jared Mayo, another Pro Bowl caliber player, was lost the majority of last year due to injury as well. He'll be back in the lineup. He's one of the top inside linebackers in the AFC. You still have Rob Nikovic, a veteran there on the outside, and then Donta Hightower, a guy who's been with the Patriots a couple years now, a product out of Alabama. So I certainly like what they have to offer at the linebackers. The biggest additions you'll see over the years, New England has struggled in the secondary, and that's where they brought in Darrelle Revis from Tampa Bay. We all know Revis was considered the best cornerback in the league for the New York Jets a couple years ago when he went down with the ACL injury. And they also brought in Brandon Browner from the Seattle Seahawks. This guy is 6'4", 220 pounds, has excellent height, excellent skills, was part of that vaunted Legion of Boom defense, ended up sitting out the latter part of last year due to a suspension. So I certainly expect both of those guys to come in and pay immediate dividends for the Patriots. If they're able to cover receivers on the outside one-on-one, that certainly is going to give Bill Belichick and that defense a lot of flexibility to be able to do a lot of things. Devin McCourty was the starting cornerback. He moves over to safety. And so this is certainly a team that if they can stay healthy across the board, like I said, there's no question I would expect New England to be right back in the AFC Championship game this year and possibly with different results. Next, we're going to move on to the Buffalo Bills. And when you look at the rest of the division in regards to the AFC East, you have the Bills, you have the Jets, you have the Dolphins. All of those teams will be fighting very hard to try to win a division and claim a wild card spot, which is very difficult to do. The AFC is loaded. You have a ton of good teams. So when I look at these teams, I give the Bills just a slight edge. I think on the offensive side of the football, they have the most weapons to work with. Second-year quarterback E.J. Manuel certainly has to make progress. Manuel was up and down, which is what you would expect from a rookie quarterback last year. Suffered some injuries, which kept him out of games. I certainly expect for him to get the ball out of his hands quick. Again, he has a lot of good weapons around him, and he's just got to find a way to stay healthy. Those weapons I speak of start with C.J. Spiller, a running back who has struggled with health himself over the years. He's proven when healthy, he certainly is a running back who can pick up the yards in big chunks and make big plays from 60, 70 yards out, so he needs to stay healthy. They still have veteran running back Fred Jackson, who was very effective last year in Spiller's absence. He's a guy who can run the ball, also very good hands and route running out of the backfield. And then the Bills added some depth, which I really like. They picked up Bryce Brown, a running back from the Philadelphia Eagles. And so you have three very good running backs with all different styles. I certainly like that. When we look at the wide receivers, the Bills went out this year. They actually moved up in the draft and drafted Sammy Watkins, the stud wide receiver from Clemson. Already in OTAs and training camp, you've certainly seen what this guy has to offer. If E.J. Manuel can get the ball in his hands, this guy is very capable. I certainly am excited to see him on the football field. Outside of Watkins, you also have Robert Woods, a very good young receiver. Last year was very productive in his first year out of USC. You certainly hope that he made a progression. And I think a wild card in the situation is Mike Williams. Williams is a guy who spent his first couple years in Tampa Bay as a rookie, had 11 TD catches, really showed a lot of promise, kind of took a fall off his second year, but certainly was able to regain some form last year with Tampa Bay. He's a Buffalo native, and he's certainly a guy that I feel would be a legitimate number 3 wide receiver to give Manuel some good options in the passing game. The Bills also still have veteran tight end Scott Chandler, who hauled in almost 60 catches last year, so he showed very reliable hands. I think the key for the Bills offense this year is going to be how their offensive line is able to hold up, especially in pass protection. And again, if second-year quarterback E.J. Manuel can hold up his end of the bargain and just keep the turnovers down and play smart football. On the defensive side of the football for the Buffalo Bills, I really like what they bolster in their front seven. You have Big Kyle Williams and Marcel Darius on the inside, making it very difficult for teams to run in between the tackles. On the outside, you have Pro Bowler Mario Williams, who certainly found his form last year. Lost a little steam down the stretch, but he's certainly one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. On the opposite side, you have Jerry Hughes, another player who's capable of getting after the football. The biggest loss that came to the Bills this year was losing second-year player Kiko Alonso. Alonso came in second place last year as Defensive Rookie of the Year, boasting over 130 tackles. He was certainly a sideline to sideline type linebacker who had the ability to defend the pass, make plays behind the line of scrimmage. So that's certainly a big loss. It's going to hurt the Bills, but the Bills were able to bring in Brandon Spikes, a savvy veteran from the New England Patriots. That was a good pickup. He was supposed to be coupled up with Alonso, but with Alonso out, he'll certainly have more responsibility on his hands. And so from a linebacker position, Spikes is certainly going to have to carry the weight for that unit. The biggest question mark for me for the Bills is in the secondary. You really don't have any named players. They certainly played well at home last year, but struggled on the road. And so that's where my concerns lie for the Bills, is really in their secondary and in that back end. We know it's a passing league, but if that front seven can hold up its end of the bargain, especially that front four, and they can create some different packages to get pressure on the quarterback, then certainly that gives their secondary a better chance to hold up. Next in line, we have the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins came within one game of making the playoffs last year. They certainly did some things to upgrade their roster. On the offensive side of football, Ryan Tannehill, he had a solid year in the second year last year. Threw for 3,913 yards, 24 TDs, 17 interceptions is really what hurts you, and obviously losing another 6 fumbles. So he certainly got to find a way to be smarter and protect the football. In the running game, Lamar Miller is a guy who picked up 709 yards last year, only on 177 carries. He was in a timeshare with Daniel Thomas. Well, now that Thomas has moved on, Miller is in place to receive more of a lead role. I certainly hope that he can really maximize his carries. Noshawn Moreno is a player that Miami brought over from the Denver Broncos. Moreno racked up over 1,500 yards of all-purpose last year with Denver, double-digit TDs. Moreno has struggled with injuries throughout his career. That's really been his only setback. If he was able to stay healthy, he's probably a player that Denver would have resigned and maybe not signed some other or drafted some other running backs in past years. But with that being said, Moreno is now in Miami. Unfortunately, he's probably going to sit out the preseason due to an injury. Had some reports coming in the other day that he said he feels good, but just wants to make sure that he's at 100% when the season starts. And you certainly can understand that. With Miller and Moreno, you definitely have two capable running backs. We'll see how the timeshare ends up playing out, but you certainly expect with Miller playing in the preseason, he should get the starting nod. But Moreno is certainly a good change of pace back, can catch out the backfield, so certainly bring some good depth and experience over to this Miami team. At the wide receiver position, you have Mike Wallace. Wallace obviously was a big free agent signing for Miami from last year. Certainly got off to a slow start during some games, had some very key drops at crucial times, but he's a very explosive player, has blazing speed. Tannehill missed him definitely on some deep passes when he had coverage beat last year, so you certainly hope that their chemistry is up to speed this year so they can hook up in the deep passing game. You have Brian Hartline, who's certainly a steady receiver at the playing opposite of Mike Wallace. He had over 1,000 yards last year, over 70 catches. So I like what Miami has to offer on the outside, a nice blend of speed and more of a possession type receiver. For the Dolphins, they're certainly going to have somebody step up though to be that number 3 and 4 receivers. And some battles going on in camp, guys like Brandon Gibson, Shar Matthews, who was certainly a pleasant surprise down the stretch for Miami last year. So guys are just going to have to step up. You're not going to be able to rely solely on Wallace and Hartline, although they should, be the main two options in the passing game. And then the guy that I really like, tight end, I'm really high on Charles Clay. Clay burst onto the scene last year, had over 700 receiving yards, over 60 catches. I really like what he brings to the table. He's certainly a guy who can open things up, be a security blanket for Ryan Tannehill, as well as work the middle. And I think he can certainly help improve Ryan Tannehill's efficiency in the red zone. So look out for big things from him. The Dolphins lost Pro Bowl tackle Jake Long last year, but did an excellent job this year replacing him with free agent Brandon Albert, who came over from the Kansas City Chiefs. Unfortunately, center Mike Pouncey originally was slated to miss maybe about half of the season. We're now starting to hear rumors and reports surfacing that he may miss the entire season. That would be a huge blow to this Miami team. Pouncey is certainly one of the better young centers in the NFL, and so we certainly hope he can get back on the field. But if the Dolphins have to play without him, they're going to have to do makeshift, and this is already an offensive line that struggled at times last year with pass protection. When we flip to the defensive side of the football, I certainly feel this is Miami's strength. They're really stout in their front seven. You have Pro Bowler Cameron Wake, who's one of the best edge pass rushers in the NFL today. You have Big Randy Starks and a guy that I really like in Jason Udrick. In the middle there, Udrick is tough at stopping the run, but also being over 300 pounds can really get after the quarterback with his agility. You have Vernon Oliver on the other side, a guy who picked up 11.5 sacks last year, so I certainly like what they offer in their front four. Last year they went out and got Dannell Ellerbe from the Baltimore Ravens, came in, paid immediate dividends, over 100 tackles, showed some flexibility, dropping back into pass coverage. You also have Philip Wheeler on the outside, who was able to get over 100 tackles. The one guy who was, from most people's perspective, I guess the weakest link of that linebacking core was Cole Misi. He's a guy who they switched this year. They moved him inside and moved Ellerbe outside, hoping he could be a little bit more productive. So you certainly hope that, but I certainly like Ellerbe and Wheeler. And I think this is a group altogether, that front seven, that is very tough and can certainly improve on what they did last year when they were very tough. The secondary is another place where they made some upgrades. You already have Brent Grimes, who's a Pro Bowl cornerback, came over from Atlanta a couple years ago. Tough, really has excellent jumping ability, good speed, so I like him. They were able to acquire veteran Cortland Finnegan from the St. Louis Rams. Finnegan, definitely was a Pro Bowl player with the Tennessee Titans a couple years ago. Went to St. Louis and was tough, but took a little bit of a drop off. He's certainly looking to rebound and restore his reputation. And I think his grittiness, his tough attitude is exactly a perfect fit for this Miami Dolphins defense. I like Grimes and Finnegan at the cornerback positions. And then when you look at the safety position, they were able to bring in Louis Delmas, a player who's very savvy, has an instincts for the ball and knows how to get it done. A very hard hitter, another guy, with a mean streak who I think will fit in excellent in Miami. And so I certainly like what that secondary now looks like as opposed to a year ago. And I'm very convinced, if the Dolphins can put in the work, I certainly think that this is a top 10 type defense, and you certainly expect for them to have to hold it down until the Miami's offense can make some adjustments, but I certainly like what the Dolphins have to offer overall as a team. Last but not least, you have the New York Jets. The Jets this year, a lot of roster changes on the offensive side of the football. Now, they did bring in Michael Vick, who I thought was going to start. But Geno Smith, the second-year quarterback they drafted from West Virginia, it looks like he's going to have the starting nod. He certainly needs to improve on his numbers from last year. He ended up with the nickname Good Geno, Bad Geno because he had one good game, then one bad game. That inconsistency is certainly not going to cut it on the NFL level, so he certainly has to improve on that. But it wasn't all his fault. Certainly in the passing game, the weapons that he had at his disposal certainly weren't viable. So, the receivers are going to have to step it up. When we look at that receiving core, the Jets went out and got Eric Decker. Signed him to a big contract. We know Decker was part of that explosive offense over with the Denver Broncos last year. And so he's got a lot of responsibility and pressure on his shoulders. He excelled really being a fourth option in Denver last year. Now he's going to be the main guy. So he's going to be the person that defenses scheme for. He's going to draw the top defensive back from each team. So I certainly think that, he's in a position where we'll really see what he's made of. When you look on the other side of him, you have Stephen Hill, a guy who struggled with catching the football his first couple years, although he has excellent speed. And Jeremy Curley, he's a nice slot receiver. I certainly like his toughness and his ability to make plays in the open field. So it's really going to be on Geno Smith and those weapons in the passing game to move the football. When we look at the ground attack, the Jets also went out and got Chris Johnson, the excellent running back from the Tennessee Titans. I know that Johnson has received a lot of flack over the years, but look, when you run for over 2,000 yards, when you're a guy that has that 4.3 speed, who's able to take it to the house at any time, you're going to draw a lot of attention. And when he was in Tennessee, his quarterbacks were Matt Hasselbeck and Jake Locker, so defenses were usually loading the box up with 7 and 8 men and made it very difficult for him. He certainly had a target on his back. He's another guy looking to restore his reputation. The Jets certainly are looking to pound the football running, so he'll have more than enough opportunities. And I certainly like what they have to offer on the left side of that line with DeBrickacy Ferguson at tackle, Brian Winters at guard, and Pro Bowl center Nick Mangold. So he should certainly be able to get through some open holes over there, but this is a very tough division. Behind Johnson, you still have Chris Ivory, who's a very good change of pace and explosive running back, and Bilal Powell. So they certainly have some viable options with Johnson taking the lead. And when we flip to the defensive side of the football for the Jets, certainly that front seven is stout. If you kind of notice a theme that we're getting through with these defenses in the AFC East, they have Muhammad Wilkerson, one of the better defensive ends in the league, with Big Sheldon Richardson as well. The defensive tackle was the defensive rookie of the year last year, certainly came in and help clog up those holes in the middle for the Jets. They still also have Quentin Coples, a guy who's been making progress every year, so I certainly like what they have to offer up front. And then you still have Calvin Pace, as well as Pro Bowl caliber inside linebacker David Harris, who'll be calling the shots for this defense. Both of them have been with Rex Ryan for some years now and are solid staples. So that front seven is nasty. The Jets defense was very tough last year. The secondary is where my concerns lie for the most part. D. Milner's in his second year from University of Alabama. He's been quoted in preseason saying that he's the best defensive back in the league, and that's all fine and dandy, but with only 2 years of work, you certainly have to put the work in and show that you can be consistent on a year in and year out basis. I think he just really needs to focus on honing his craft, staying in the film room, and just putting the work in. Making a comment like that, I mean, you certainly want to feel that you're the best, but you have to go out and prove it. And certainly after what we've seen from him last year, he's in no position to make a statement like that. But he's a very good young player. He certainly got his work cut out for him. He'll be assigned to each team's top wide receiver. So when the year is over, we'll certainly be able to have some more stats and game film to see if that statement holds true. As for the rest of the Jets secondary, you certainly want to watch out for Calvin Pryor, the safety they picked up out of the University of Louisville this year. He's a guy who's been making a lot of noise in training camp as a hitter as well as in coverage, so you certainly want to keep your eye on him. Dewan Landry is a veteran. He's solid. Certainly not the fastest players. Has dropped off a little bit from some years ago with the Ravens, but you certainly like a veteran back there to help coach Pryor up and make sure he's in position where he needs to be. And so that Jets secondary is probably where my question lies. I certainly like what they have to offer in their front seven. When I look at this division overall, like I said, the New England Patriots without question are the cream of the crop. I certainly expect the Patriots to be in another year of 12-4. 13-3, winning the division and having one of the best two records in the AFC. When I look at the rest of the division, the Bills, the Jets, and Dolphins are all very, very close as far as what they have to offer. If I had to give a slight edge, I would give it to Miami. Tannehill is the most seasoned and experienced quarterback. With this going into his fourth year, for both Geno Smith of the Jets and the E.J. Manuel of the Bills, second year guys. And the Dolphins defense, I probably would give a nod across the board too. So I would probably say Miami will be knocking at the door, but don't be surprised to see the Bills or the Jets right there as well if they can get steady quarterback play from their younger quarterbacks. For the Dolphins, Bills, and Jets, I all see them coming in somewhere between 7-9, 8-8, 9-7. And like I said, the AFC is loaded. So, I mean, every team certainly has a chance to be in a wild card hunt coming into the last couple weeks of the season. All right, that wraps up our first segment for the AFC East. Once again, it's the NFL Exporter. You're listening to the Final Wrap Show here on the DerekShapiroShow.com. We'll be right back and jump over into the AFC North to see what that division looks like. Be back in a moment. Everyone, welcome back to the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show with your host here, the NFL Exporter, Lance Goodman on DerekShapiroShow.com. Now we're going to hop over into the AFC North, another tough division. That's one thing you have to love about the NFL is the parity. Every week the games are very competitive. You can't just come in saying for sure that this team or that team is going to win, with the exception of a couple games or a couple teams. So the same holds true for the AFC North. I'm going to start off with the division winner from last year, the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals come in this year with certainly a high-powered offense. You have Andy Dalton at quarterback. Dalton certainly stepped his game up last year, but still hasn't been able to win a playoff game and still has come up MIA, really just making some bad decisions in the games that they lost to cost this team. Everybody's looking to see if he's finally ready to step up and take that next step this year to winning a playoff game and just really being steady, cutting down on the turnovers and the silly mistakes at the most crucial time for the Bengals. The Bengals have some very good running backs, starting off with Giovanni Bernard. The second-year player is very explosive, showed an ability to run the ball as well as catch it out the backfield. I'm certainly excited about his prospects this year. Should be a very, very good and exciting player. You still have Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, has been steady for years running the football on the ground. And they went out and drafted rookie Jeremy Hill from LSU, another guy guy who certainly adds some depth and a good change of pace back, so we'll see how that works out. But it's through the air where the Bengals certainly do their damage. A.J. Green, certainly one of the top 10 players in the NFL this year. Excellent year last year. Just continues to put up the big numbers. His third straight year since becoming into the NFL of over 1,000 yards. Big play guy, 6'4". I mean, there's really nothing that this guy can't do. He's definitely one of the best players in the NFL overall. A guy that you certainly want to look out for is, Marvin Jones. Excuse me for not knowing his name. It took me a minute to remember that. But Marvin Jones is certainly a player that you want to look out for. Look, Jones had 10 TD receptions last year and wasn't even a starter. I certainly love his elusiveness, his speed. He runs good routes, has good hands, a fearless player. And then Mohamed Sanu. Last year they were electing to start Sanu. I felt that Jones was the better player. We'll see how it shakes out this year. But either way it goes, Andy Dalton certainly has three good options to pass the ball to in the passing game at the wide receiver position. He also has two good tight ends, Jermaine Gresham, certainly a guy who you want to see a little bit more consistency from, just with some drops and some fumbles, but he's certainly a good young tight end. And then Tyler Eifert will be in his second year, certainly had a nice rookie year. I certainly like his ability to catch the ball, has good speed, is certainly both these players present problems for defenses, for their linebackers to cover. So Dalton certainly has more than enough weapons on offense to move the ball. The Bengals have very good players at the skill position. The offensive line is certainly the one area that you may have a little bit of concern. Look, these guys certainly have to open up holes in order for the running game to flourish. And in pass protection, they've got to do a better job of protecting Andy Dalton. That was certainly some of the reason that Dalton was making some of these mistakes. But overall, this is definitely an explosive offense that can put the points up. The defensive side of the football has been sturdy for Coach Marvin Lewis over the past couple years, but with some injuries, losing a couple players, this is certainly a unit that has to prove itself again. We're certainly going to start off with defensive tackle Geno Atkins. Atkins came into last year being one of the top-rated defensive tackles in the entire NFL, suffered a bad ACL injury, so he'll certainly be back in the starting lineup this year. We certainly want to make sure that he's back at full strength. You know how it is sometimes with these injuries. Players just don't get back to the Pro Bowl and All-Pro level that they were playing at. You certainly need that from him because the Giants lost one of their, the Bengals lost one of their defensive ends this year with pass rushing specialist Michael Johnson taking his business to Tampa Bay. They still do have Carlos Dunlap, who's very good at rushing the passer, but certainly Geno Atkins is a steady rock in the middle of that defense that really made everything go. When you look at the linebackers, Ray Maluga is certainly a guy that I like from USC. He's just had problems staying on the field. When he's on the field, he's certainly been a playmaker, but injuries have certainly held him up from being as effective as he liked to be. And Vontaze Burfict is certainly a Pro Bowl caliber player. The last he came onto the map actually in 2012. Certainly followed it up with a stellar year last year. He's a guy who can make plays all over the field. Certainly one of the better linebackers in the NFL. And the secondary is an area where I think it could be a little shaky if the Bengals aren't able to get the pressure that they've gotten in past years. And like I said, a large part of that was certainly a healthy Geno Atkins and Michael Johnson. And so they have Terrence Newman. He's 35 years old right now, certainly not as fast as he used to be, but a very smart player. And on the other side, you have Leon Hall. Certainly a player who at 29 years of age is certainly slowing down a bit, but both of these cornerbacks are very smart, very instinctive. And so what I'm looking for is their first round draft pick, Denard, who came from Michigan State, was certainly rated the top cornerback coming out in this year's draft. I should say one of the top cornerbacks in this year's draft. He certainly has an opportunity to step on the field. I don't know if he's going to start, but he certainly should be a guy who can factor in nickel packages, and we'll certainly get a good look at him in the preseason. When you look on the back end for the for the Cincinnati Bengals. Reggie Nelson has always been a solid player back there, but they're certainly going to have to hold up their end of the bargain. So this Cincinnati Bengals defense certainly has been one of the better defensive units in the past couple years, but this year they're certainly going to have to reestablish themselves. So we will certainly want to keep a lookout for that. Next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Now, look, for the Ravens, certainly this offense is going to be a new look, and I would say it's much needed. If you look at what happened to this unit last year, the ground game just completely sputtered. Outside of Torrey Smith, they didn't have any proven guys at the wide receiver position. Jacoby Jones, who's a good veteran receiver, got hurt early, and they just found themselves in a bad situation, having to pass the ball way too much. It's certainly not their identity. I know they want to get back to running the ball effectively. Ray Rice, I never seen it before. He just, went from a guy who was posting over, 17 and 1800s of all-purpose yards in the past 3 and 4 years in his career. Last year, couldn't even make it to 700 rushing yards. I mean, I just averaged 3 yards a carry. It was just pathetic. And so you certainly hope they can improve on that. For Rice, he's going to miss the first 2 games of the year due to suspension, due to off-the-field injury. So Bernard Pierce is going to have to step in and take that role. Pierce is certainly capable, but Ray Rice is certainly the guy that we're going to be seeing if he can rebound this year, because last year it was just a travesty. They brought over Gary Kubiak. He was the head coach of the Houston Texans last year. Kubiak now is the offensive coordinator, and so you're certainly hoping that that zone blocking scheme that was so effective for him in Houston, where you've seen Arian Foster excel, you certainly hope to get that type of production from the Ravens running back. If they can get the ground game going, that will certainly do wonders to take pressure off quarterback Joe Flacco, who certainly has some effective weapons in the passing game. Torrey Smith, obviously a proven receiver, big time speed, over 1,000 yards. I really like what he brings to the table. They went out and got veteran Steve Smith from the Carolina Panthers. I certainly like that. Smith has lost a step. Is not your biggest receiver at only 5'9", but he's tough as nails and certainly runs all the routes and certainly can still make plays. And so now with the pressure being off him, in Carolina he was the #1 receiver. Now he'll be the #2 receiver and be in some more one-on-one matchups. I certainly feel he can step in and be effective. And second-year wide receiver Marlon Brown, who had a nice rookie campaign, now can move over to the slot. And Dennis Pitta, another guy who missed the majority of last season, certainly one of Joe Flacco's favorite targets. You couple him with Owen Daniels, who they brought over from the Houston Texans, and now Flacco has a lot more to work with this year. So I certainly think that the Ravens offense is in line to be more productive this year if they can get that ground game going. When we look on the defensive side of the football, Haloti Ngata has certainly got to get back up to speed. Nada's certainly still one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, but his play has dropped off just a tad bit in the last couple of years. So we certainly want to see him playing back at a top level. And rookie Tim Jernigan from Florida State has certainly been making waves in OTAs. He's certainly a guy who can pick up a lot of experience from Ngata. Expect for him to be on the field making plays, and I think he'll help bolster that front line a whole lot. I really like the Ravens linebackers, probably the best unit they've had since future Hall of Famer Ray Lewis stepped out of the equation last year. On the outside, you have Terrell Suggs and Elvis Dumervil, certainly two guys who can be tough against the run, but they certainly excel in rushing the passer. When you look at passing situations, especially third down, those are two guys you must account for. Your quarterback could go down quickly. On the inside, you still have Darryl Smith, a savvy veteran who was sturdy in the middle last year, and C.J. Mosley, was the best linebacker coming out of college last year from the University of Alabama. He's also had a strong OTAs and training camp this far, so I certainly like what they have to offer. The secondary is where my concerns lie once again here. They have Jimmy Smith and Ladarius Webb on the outside. Those are two good corners. I like Webb and I like Smith, two guys who, if they can stay healthy, certainly can get the job done. Smith had an off-the-field altercation this year, so he may miss a little time, but if those two guys can stay healthy, really it's a must for them to stay healthy, because the Ravens don't have a lot of depth at the cornerback position. And then the safety is certainly the area where they're weak at. They struggled last year. Matt Elam, the second-year guy from Florida, is certainly going to have to step up and make plays. So if any area of concern for me for the Ravens, it would certainly be their safeties. And then as I forgot to mention too, as far as the Ravens concerns on the offensive side of the football, it may possibly be with the offensive line. A couple years ago, when they won that Super Bowl and when they were having their most success, you have future Hall of Fame center Matt Burke. You had Ben Grubbs at guard, and you had Michael O'Hore at tackle. With those players gone now, I still do like what they have with Eugene Monroe at tackle. You have Osa Mili at guard and Jeremy Zuta at center, but they're certainly going to show that they can play at that high level. But I certainly like what the Ravens have to offer this year. You certainly like, the upgrades that they made. Next, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben Roethlisberger is at the helm again, and with him at quarterback, you know that anything's possible. The Steelers were able to really get back into who they are this year. Last year, they drafted Le'Veon Bell from Michigan State. Got off to a slightly slow start due to injury last year, but once he found his groove, he was certainly effective running the football on the ground. They were able to go out and get bruising running back LeGarrette Blount from the New England Patriots, and then they drafted Dre Archer from Kent State. So you have three different running backs. Archer, a speedster, maybe in the mold of a Darren Sproles, Percy Harvin type back, just in regards to how they're going to try to utilize him, running the football, matching him up against linebackers, screens, reverses. They just want to get this guy touches because he certainly has big playability. And then with Bell and Blunt, you have two guys who can certainly pound the football out on the ground. So I certainly like the Steelers getting back to their identity. The wide receivers, Antonio Brown, should be in line for another big season. I'm not sure if he's going to accumulate basically 1,500 yards and over 100 catches as he did last year, but it'll certainly be Big Ben's favorite target. And Brown is certainly a guy, once he gets off the line of scrimmage, very shifty, very quick in and out of his cuts. And him and Ben Roethlisberger certainly have some great rapport. They're going to have other guys step up, though. They don't have a lot of experience with Emmanuel Sanders, Mike Wallace being a couple wide receivers who left, respectively, Wallace last year and then Sanders this offseason. So they're going to have some other guys step up and make plays in that passing game. And Heath Miller certainly is still one of the better tight ends in the NFL. Getting a bit older, but again, another target that Ben Roethlisberger has a lot of security and confidence in. As far as the offensive line goes, the Steelers certainly want to remain healthy. Last year, it just got off to a bad start. They lost Pro Bowl center Marquise Pouncey at the beginning of the season. Their number one draft pick from last year, David DeCastro, certainly another good young player on the interior. They lost him. So if they can get those two players back and have Marcus Gilbert, another guy they drafted, step up, that certainly would be a good thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. When we flip over to the defensive side of the football for the Pittsburgh Steelers, here's where things are not accustomed to what we're used to seeing. Now, we know that Dick LeBeau is certainly one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, but when you look at their roster, you only have 4 players remaining from a team that was making the playoffs consistently 2 and 3 years ago. Those players being Lawrence Timmons, Ike Taylor, William Gay, and Troy Polamalu. Now, we know that Timmons, Taylor, and Polamalu are certainly, kind of top 10 to 15 players at their positions, but the rest of that defense is certainly going to have to step up. Jarvis Jones, the guy they drafted last year from Georgia, he's certainly going to have to play much better this year. They lost Lamar Woodley to free agency. They also lost last year or did not resign defensive end James Harrison. So Jones was drafted for that reason, and he's certainly going to have to step up and pay dividends. Same thing, Big Casey Hampton, he's not there holding down that middle anymore, so they're going to have to get tougher on that front four, and that secondary is going to have to step up. But I do think with veterans Taylor, who's still very capable, of being effective, locking down other teams' wide receivers, and Troy Polamalu certainly needs to play at that all-pro level we're used to seeing him play at. And so we'll see how things shake out for the Steelers this year. I think the offense certainly is going to have to play smart football and play ball control to keep that defense off the field and from wearing down as much as possible. Last but not least, we have the Cleveland Browns. The big issue for the Browns is you have a whole new offense, a cast of offensive players at the skill positions when you look at their team. Last year, you had Brian Hoyer. Start off the season with Brandon Whedon. He's no longer there. Once Brian Hoyer stepped into the lineup, he got injured. But the starting running back, you had guys like Willis McGay. He really just fill-ins. You know, I mean, when the leading rusher on your team doesn't even run for more than 500 yards, then you know that's a huge problem. They went out and got Ben Tate from the Houston Texans to try to help that. They also drafted Terrence West, so somebody's going to have to step up here and run that football effectively, or it's going to be another long season for the Cleveland Browns. Like I said, just your top running back on your team not even eclipsing 500 yards rushing. It's plain and simple. It's not acceptable. When we look at the wide receivers, we all know that Josh Gordon led the NFL in yardage last year and one of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL. As of this recording, we're waiting to get word to hear if his suspension for a year long is going to hold up. You know that Gordon appealed that. I certainly think it will, and I think it's in his best interest. You know, you certainly want Gordon on the field. He's a big-time playmaker who can take it to the house from anywhere on the field, as we saw him score on a 95-yard touchdown last year. But, you know, this is after missing games last year due to being suspended for illegal substance. He comes back this year. He pops up positive for that again, and then he ends up getting a DUI. So I certainly, as much as I like Gordon, would like to see him on the field, I certainly think a year out of football would help him so he can clear his head and really get a taste of what it is to understand that being in the NFL is a privilege, and you know, him possibly sitting out and having to, you know, miss the game, we certainly hope, you know, would help him to get back on track and put those behind him, because he's certainly one of the best young talents in the NFL. With that being said, the Browns are going to have to rely on newcomers, Nate Burleson from the Detroit Lions, Miles Austin, who they picked up from the Dallas Cowboys, and Lavelle Hawkins, a nice speedy slot receiver they picked up from the Cincinnati Bengals. Jordan Cameron is one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Just fell short of 1,000 yards last year. Had 7 TD receptions, but it was really sporadic. He had 5 TDs in his first 3 games, and then after that, he just kind of popped up MIA. You know, defenses certainly started to scheme for him a lot more, and then with the quarterback carousel that took place in Cleveland, it certainly didn't allow him to develop any rapport with any of the quarterbacks. But when Brian Hoyer was there, he certainly was able to excel. He had 3 TD catches against the Minnesota Vikings, and it was Hoyer who was at quarterback. So when you look at this offense, you're saying to yourself, especially if Gordon's not there, it's going to take some time for them to gel. I'm quite sure this is a unit in the preseason who's going to get in as much work as possible. And, of course, we can't leave out Johnny Manziel. Johnny Payday is trying to get a starting job fighting against Brian Hoyer. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. He's obviously a fan favorite, and I think he's a guy that I think Hoyer has earned his stripes based on how effective he was last year. But we'll see how Manziel plays in the preseason. He'll certainly have his opportunity. When we go to the defensive side of football for the Cleveland Browns, last year, this was certainly one of their strengths, and I would suspect that it was be similar this year. They had a couple losses with Pro Bowl inside linebacker DeQuell Jackson, as well as T.J. Ward, who left to the Broncos, but they still have Big Phil Taylor up front, making things difficult for opposing teams in the trenches. They still have outside linebacker Paul Kruger, along with excuse me with the pronouncing of his name, Burkavius Mingo. He's certainly a guy who was effective last year, and I would suspect with him making progress in the offseason, he'll certainly have a say-so in making some noise in the Browns' front 7 there. You also brought in veteran Carlos Dansby. And so even though Dansby is not as fast as he's used to be, he's certainly a smart player, instinctive player, and can certainly help to keep things intact for Cleveland's front 7. As far as defensive backs are concerned, Joe Hayden is certainly one of the best defensive backs in the NFL. When he can hold his own against a guy like A.J. Green, he's certainly worth speaking on. So I expect Hayden to certainly come out and continue to be effective in locking down corners. The Browns used their first-round draft pick this year to pick up Justin Gilbert from Oklahoma State. Gilbert certainly has speed and size. I certainly like what he can bring to the table, but making the adjustment to the NFL. Certainly takes some time, but I think with Joe Hayden there, that's certainly to his advantage. And then they also went out and picked up veteran safety Dante Whitner. Is a guy who can certainly step in and make plays. The only problem I have with Whitner, he's certainly a hard hitter and a good tackler, but he struggles in coverage. And that's one thing that you don't want from your safeties. And so I certainly think his veteran leadership can help. But I kind of have some question marks around their secondary as a whole. But this is a black and blue division. Every team in this division is tough. They beat up on each other. And when it's all said and done, I still give Cincinnati a slight edge. I think they can win a division, maybe at 10-6, but certainly expect for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens, overall, when I look at their roster, they're certainly capable of winning this division at 10-6. I think whoever wins this division, 10-6 is a record, but certainly the Ravens, the Steelers, and the Bengals all will be in the playoff hunt when the postseason approaches. For the Browns, I think this is a year that they just try to find out some things about their younger players, wait for Josh Gordon to come back next year, and really give a chance to get this new coaching staff a chance to evaluate the roster and then make the proper additions and subtractions in the offseason. All right, that wraps up the AFC North. It's the NFL Exporter with the final wrap on DerekShapiroShow.com. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll hop over to the AFC South. Alright everybody, welcome back, and once again it's the NFL Exporter. Lance Goodman here with you on the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show here on DerekShapiroShow.com. And now we're going to take a look at the AFC South Division. Leading off the way are the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts are obviously led by star quarterback Andrew Luck. Luck has certainly made progress from year one as a rookie to year two. What else can you say about this guy? He's a consummate professional. You see why he was the #1 draft pick back in 2012. And I certainly expect for his stellar play to continue. The guy just puts in the work. And, some guys, they're just flat-out winners and they're flat-out leaders. And that's exactly what Andrew Luck is. I certainly like what Luck has at his disposal this year. Last year, a couple key injuries possibly held this Indianapolis Colts offense back a tad bit, even though they certainly were effective. But when you look at what he has this year at the wide receiver position, you have T.Y. Hilton, a guy who can blow the top off your coverage. He had over 1,000 yards last year, a ton of big plays, over 30, 40, and 50 yards. You bring back Reggie Wayne into the equation. Wayne was lost at about the midpoint last season. Big loss. The veteran wide receiver certainly is one of the best in the business. And if he continues at the rate that he's at the last couple of years of his career, I'm quite sure he'll be receiving some Hall of Fame consideration one day, especially since he has a Super Bowl ring added on his resume. And then they brought in Hakeem Nicks. Now look, Nicks was a guy over in New York who looked like one of the best and upcoming receivers from the time he joined the NFL his rookie years, but injuries really hindered him. When healthy, though, he put up some big numbers for the Giants. It was certainly a part of their Super Bowl run a couple years ago when they beat the Patriots in 2012. And so bringing Nicks into the equation, now Luck has three solidified wide receivers in the NFL. This is Hilton's third year. Like I said, Nicks is a veteran, and Reggie Wayne is a future Hall of Famer. So, with those three wide receivers, you certainly expect for somebody to be open at all times. And bringing Nicks over, you certainly like the depth as well. When you look at the tight ends, you have Kobe Fleener, who went to Stanford as well. Him and Luck obviously have great chemistry. But they have Dwayne Allen, a guy who missed all of last year. Allen is an excellent blocker, and he's a very good pass catcher. Came out of Clemson a couple years ago too. So I certainly like what Andrew Luck has to work with as far as passing options. I think with those five receivers and tight ends to get a ball to. I think that he can certainly cut down on his turnovers, and in this offense will certainly be able to move the ball. The running back position in the running game is really where Indianapolis has struggled consistently over the years. That offensive line is certainly going to have to pick it up and get it together, because no matter how good you pass the ball, you certainly have to have some type of threat on the ground. Now look, they have two viable options. Trent Richardson, this is his third year, had an excellent rookie campaign with Cleveland, but the Browns decided to part ways with him last year, and seeing how he produced in Indianapolis, I certainly couldn't blame him. But it was his first year. The trade did happen, a couple games into the season, and so with the full off season and having a better grasp and understanding of the playbook, you certainly hope that Richardson can get back to form that he did as a rookie. He has a ton of talent. He has to just put it together, and I couldn't think of a better place that it could be on display than here in Indianapolis. Behind him, you have veteran Ahmad Bradshaw. Bradshaw picked up a couple Super Bowl rings with the Giants, came over in the offseason a couple years ago. Bradshaw certainly has some gas left in the tank, very shifty runner, good hands out the backfield. So I think that between the two, they certainly have an opportunity to have an effective running game on the ground, as long as that offensive line can pick up the pace. But I certainly expect for the Colts offense to be very exciting this year. On the defensive side of the football, they're going to be at a loss starting off the season. Their best defensive player, and honestly one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL, Robert Mathis, is going to miss a couple games due to some off-the-field issues. Without Mathis in the lineup, they're certainly going to need somebody to show leadership and step up on the field. They really don't have anybody up there. I would say if anybody, you're certainly looking at second-year outside linebacker Beyond Warner, who was drafted last year from Florida State. You're certainly expecting him to come in and do some things. He was basically MIA last year, so you spend a first-round draft pick on the guy. You certainly expect him to make some type of impact sooner than later. Mathis will be back after a couple games, and when he comes back, he'll certainly continue to be one of the most dominant pass rushers in the NFL. Just a playmaker, period. But in his absence, a guy that I certainly like that they picked up is DeQuell Jackson, the inside linebacker who came over from the Cleveland Browns. Jackson flies under the radar, but is a steady guy, over 100 tackles for the past 5-6 years in a row. Sound tackler, can certainly get guys lined up. And we're talking about leadership here. A lot of young players on this Colts team, so I think a guy who'll be valuable in the locker room and just a steady rock and helping stop the run for this Colts defense. When I look at the Colts secondary, also a little shaky. And excuse me, I certainly can't forget Eric Walden, the outside linebacker. He's another guy that's been with the Colts for some years now. Has certainly proved his value. Another guy who certainly can get the job done, that's helping stop the run and in pass coverage as well. Speaking of pass coverage, if there was a concern outside of the front seven, where they do have some pieces, like I said, with Mathis, with Jackson, with Walden, but this secondary certainly has to play good. Now look, there were certainly times that the Colts secondary last year played well. The addition of Vontae Davis from the Miami Dolphins certainly helped. Davis turned in a good year last year, so I certainly like what he can do as far as coverage is concerned. And you have big hitter LaRon Landry, who came over from the New York Jets. So certainly a guy who can lay the wood down, very effective around the line of scrimmage. So I like those two, but the other corner and the other safety position are question marks to me, and I certainly think if you have any worries about the Indianapolis Colts team, it's certainly on the defensive side of the football. But with that being said, this team is full of young talent. I certainly like what I see out of this roster, and I certainly expect for the Colts to be back in the playoffs again this year. Moving on next, I expect the Houston Texans to rebound last year. Obviously, things just went completely wrong. Matt Schaub had an awful year. Arian Foster was gone due to injury. You had Pro Bowl tackle Dwayne Brown was lost due to injury. On the defensive side of the ball, Brian Cushing was lost due to injury. It was just a lot of things that happened with this Texans team, and this ship, quickly sank. But I certainly expect for them to rebound. They certainly have the type of talent and experience on that roster. Now we're looking at the offense. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a guy who's come in, and it looks like he will be the starter. Obviously, Case Keenum will certainly fight him for that, but I think Fitzpatrick is a little bit more seasoned and up to the task, and he has some nice weapons at his disposal. Look, let's be honest. If Arian Foster is back healthy, we know he's one of the premier running backs in the NFL. He's still only 27 years old and has what it takes, especially in the red zone and goal line area. He can certainly kill you on the ground. I like what they did by adding some depth. They lost Ben Tate to Cleveland, but you bring over Andre Brown from the New York Giants. Look, Brown was certainly an effective runner while he was in New York, so I like that 1-2 punch there. On the outside, you have All-Pro Andre Johnson. Johnson, being the consummate professional he is, came into training camp this year focused, and I think that he's going to have another big year. On the other side, I like second-year player DeAndre Hopkins. Showed a ton of talent and potential last year. If he made the progress in the offseason, you certainly like the 1-2 punch there at the wide receiver position. But after that, they're thin at wide receiver, so they're certainly going to need some other players to step up and make plays in the passing game. And here's another hit they lost, veteran Owen Daniels, who had been there for quite some time. And so, you're certainly looking for someone to step up and make some plays there in the passing game. But certainly Andre Johnson and DeAndre Hopkins are two guys who can get the job done. On the offensive line, you still have Chris Myers at center. Dwayne Brown will be back. I think the biggest question mark we're wondering here is what's going to be going on with the running game. We know that they have been running that zone blocking scheme for the past couple years, which did wonders for Houston's running game. But now with Gary Kubiak gone and running that system in Baltimore, you wonder if the Texans are going to keep that. That's something I'm certainly going to make sure I have that for you by the time that the regular season starts. Preseason begins this week, so we'll be able to get a look at that. You just wonder if that zone blocking scheme isn't there anymore. Could that possibly affect how good of a runner that Arian Foster can be? We flip to the defensive side of the football. Look, this is a unit. If they stay healthy, I certainly like what I see on paper. Obviously, J.J. Watt is one of the best interior linemen in the NFL. Can stop the run, make plays all over the field. Always comes up being the top batted ball guy in the NFL as far as swatting balls down at the line of scrimmage. Obviously can get after the quarterback. The guy's engine never stops. I love Watt as a player. I certainly look for him to be explosive. Number 1 draft pick Jadeveon Clowney has an opportunity to come in and contribute immediately. Certainly we're excited to see what he can do. At South Carolina, battled some injuries. Was a lot of discussions and talks about what he could do coming into the draft, but he certainly looked the part in the preseason. You add him into the equation on the front end there with J.J. Watt, and we're talking about a lot of plays happening there. Brian Cushing, I mentioned earlier, was lost all of last season due to an ACL injury. We certainly hope that he can get back to full speed. Cushing is another player that, when healthy, certainly one of the better outside linebackers in the NFL. Versatile, can stop the run as well as drop back into pass coverage. And then we're looking at, Whitney Marsalis is a player that they drafted a couple years ago who they wanted to come in and kind of fill the void for Super Mario Williams, who went off to Buffalo. He showed some promise last year at 7 sacks, but still going to need to do a little better job. But with those players being in that front 7 there, I certainly like what Houston is capable of, and they should be a much tougher unit. On the back end there, you have veteran Jonathan Joseph. Joseph is still one of the better defensive backs in the league, but he did get burnt, get beat in coverage more than we were accustomed to seeing last year. Could have just been to lack of morale. The Texans end up losing their last 14 straight games of the season. Could have just been a situation, but I'm certainly sure he's looking to rebound. On the other side, you have Kareem Jackson. This will be his 4th year with the Texans, so he's certainly a guy that we're expecting to start paying some dividends, and he certainly showed flashes last year. I think on the back end is where we have concern here. The safety position, Daniel Manning used to be there. He's no longer there. And so I certainly want to see how that plays out in preseason. Those positions possibly could be up for grabs. So either way it goes, this should be a way more competitive Houston Texans team, barring that they can stay healthy. Next in line, we have the Tennessee Titans. The Titans are another team kind of in transition mode on the offensive side of the football. Jake Locker is entering his last year under contract, so I'm certainly sure he'll be trying to put on his A game, but he struggled with injuries as well as being accurate with the football over the last couple years. So, shaky quarterback play is always an issue in the NFL. They parted ways with Chris Johnson, the star running back. So you have Sean Green back there. The guy you want to keep an eye out on is Bishop Sankey. He's a talented young running back who was drafted this year. Certainly has an opportunity to garner that starting role in the preseason. Certainly, if he's not starting, I certainly expect for him to be in the lineup a lot. So he's a nice, young, exciting player. At the wide receiver position, these are guys who, obviously, I think if they were with a Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers, a Drew Brees, these pinpoint quarterbacks who can turn anyone into a star, these guys will work. But with Jake Locker at quarterback, I'm not sure. You have Kendall Wright, who certainly had a good second year last year with over 1,000 yards and 94 catches. Justin Hunter was a rookie last year who came in and made some big plays, and Nate Washington, the veteran, is still there. So, not the best wide receiving core, but at the same time, these are guys who can get the job done. The onus is really on Locker in that running game. I love this Titans offensive line. You have Pro Bowler Michael Rules. Chance Warmack came in last year and paid immediate dividends. The guard who they picked up from Alabama. You still have Andy Levitre. And then they went out and got Michael O'Hore in the offseason and drafted top prospect Taylor Lewan from Michigan. And so this is still one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And if they can open up some holes, like I said, make sure you watch out for Sankey. I think he's a guy who can come in this year and certainly have an impact running behind that offensive line. I also left out, Delaney Walker. He's a very good tight end, has good hands and good speed. So when I'm looking at this Titans offense, it really lies on the shoulders of Jake Locker. I really think they'll be able to run the ball effectively, so Locker is going to have to step up and make plays in the passing game. When I look at this Titans defense, I certainly think the front four is an area that they're going to have to solidify in the preseason. But I certainly still like Akeem Ayers. He's been a big-time playmaker for this defense since they drafted him outside linebacker a couple years ago from UCLA. They brought over veteran Sean Phillips for the Denver Broncos. Phillips certainly is a guy who knows how to keep his nose around the football and make plays, so he should be an excellent addition, especially in passing situations. And Zach Brown is an excellent young inside linebacker. So their linebackers is an area where they're certainly strong at. And on the back end, look, this secondary certainly is capable of making a lot of plays. And one of the reasons that the Titans defense was able to hold up last year, at one defensive back, you have Jason McCourty. And then at the safeties, you have hard-hitting Bernard Pollard and free safety Michael Griffin, who's always one of the best free safeties in the NFL. And so if they can get that front four together and Jake Locker can be effective at quarterback, the Titans are certainly a team that may creep up and be in a playoff hunt when it gets to the end of the season. Last but not least, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars, obviously the lowly team in the NFL. Let's face it, they have Chad Henne. Henne has shown to be a very good quarterback, but he just doesn't have the weapons to pass the ball to. Now, they did draft Blake Bortles. I'm not sure if Bortles is going to start this year. It doesn't appear that way, but we'll certainly get a chance to look at him in the preseason. They're certainly banking on him being a franchise quarterback in the future. Running the ball, they parted ways with Maurice Jones-Drew, so it'll be unusual not to see him there. They picked up running back Toby Gerhart from the Minnesota Vikings. Gerhart was a good backup in Minnesota, but I don't see him myself being a starting running back in the NFL, so we'll certainly see how that plays out, but he's expected to be the workhorse. In the passing game, they have Cecil Shorts, who's a good young receiver, and they drafted Markeith Lee out of USC. He's certainly a guy with good explosion and good hands hands and has playmaking ability, but they've been hurt by off the field issues. Talented young receiver Justin Blackmon won't be around this year. Similar situation, in my opinion, as Josh Gordon just has been constantly getting into encounters with illegal substance and things off the field, so he won't be around. And then Ace Sanders is another talent. They drafted him last year from University of South Carolina, got into some off the field issues. He'll miss some time. So they do still have tight end Mercedes Lewis, who always is pretty productive, has good size at 6'7", but overall, you just don't see the pieces in place on this Jacksonville Jaguar offense to be effective. I do think this is the strong suit of their team. With that being said, I think that speaks volumes about why this team doesn't do well. You certainly hope that the offensive line can hold up. Last year, Luke Joeckel, their number 1 draft pick, only played in 5 games. You certainly need him to step up and do better. And they did go out and get Zane Beadles, who was a Pro Bowler with the Denver Broncos, within the last couple years. So they made the upgrades necessary. But it's really on the defensive side of the football where this team just really is going to struggle to get it done. Now, look, you do like what they tried to do in regards to bringing over some veterans. They brought over Chris Clemens from the Seattle Seahawks, Jason Babin, so added some depth there on the front line to go along with defensive end Tyson Alelu, who's done well since he's been there. But when you look beyond that front 4, you certainly have a lot of question marks. Paul Posnowski, certainly a very good player. He's really done well since he's been in the NFL, but the secondary is an area where you really can't recognize any name. And with that being the case and this being a passing league, you certainly know that it's going to hurt the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, they certainly have their work cut out. I'm quite sure moving forward they'll be looking to focus their attention on shoring up that secondary. So when we look at the AFC South as a whole, I still like the Indianapolis Colts winning this division. I think a 10-6 record will get the job done. But the Houston Texans, again, if they're able to stay healthy, they should be breathing down their neck and there at the end to try to fight to win that division with Indianapolis. Tennessee is more of a 7-9 team, and the Jaguars will probably only win 3 or 4 games. So we'll see how it works out. All right. When we come back, we'll cover our last division for the show, being the AFC West. Once again, it's the NFL Exporter. You're watching the Final Wrap on the DerekShapiroShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Final Wrap Sports Talk Show with your host, the NFL Exporter, here on DerekShapiroShow.com. And let's go ahead and finish up the show by talking about the AFC West. Leading off the way is none other than Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos, who came up 1 game short of winning it all last year, losing in an embarrassing fashion to the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl. So I'm quite sure that Manning, along with this entire team, certainly had a sour taste in their mouth over the entire summer. And I certainly don't expect for Peyton Manning to duplicate or outdo his historic numbers from last year, passing for 55 touchdowns and over 5,200 yards. But I certainly expect for Manning to come really close to those numbers, and he'll find some other areas to get better in. You know how it is with Peyton Manning, the ultimate perfectionist. I'm quite sure he spent every day this offseason thinking about X's and O's and how he could get better. And a guy like that, he's really a winner, and so it's not even about only him getting better, but he's certainly a guy who can make his teammates better. When you look at the running back position, Monty Ball will now be carrying the load now that Noshawn Moreno is going to Miami. Ball certainly showed promise in his rookie season last year. Came in behind Moreno, was very effective running the ball, has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, and barring those setbacks, I certainly expect for Ball to be able to put up the big numbers, all purpose, as well as scoring touchdowns, because the Denver Broncos are certainly a team who will stay in the red zone and stay with goal line opportunities. Third-year guy Ronnie Hillman, who was slated to start last year, had trouble holding onto the football. He's certainly in line to be the backup running back to ball. And look, Hillman has a ton of talent. He's a very shifty guy, elusive in the open field. If he can hold on to the football, this certainly bodes well for Denver to have a nice 1-2 punch and some nice depth at running back. Wide receivers, we have Pro Bowler Demaryius Thomas, certainly in line for another big year. Wes Welker will continue to do damage at the slot position. Tight end Julius Thomas certainly should do well, possibly even better than last year. He was a guy who burst onto the scene with 785 yards and 12 TDs. Now with him being in his second year under Peyton Manning, he's a guy who I'm talking about. Manning probably will help him to be a better player. In the Broncos, lost wide receiver Eric Decker, but went out and brought in Emmanuel Sanders from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you certainly feel that Sanders is a guy that Peyton Manning is going to demand nothing from the best from him. He certainly will be in position to put up Eric Decker type numbers. Decker last year had over 1,200 yards receiving and 12 TDs. So this offense will continue to flow. They certainly have the majority of their starters back on the offensive line. And once again, when it's a Peyton Manning ran offense, there's really nothing to say. Just a matter of watching the numbers stack up and accumulate. On the defensive side of the football, certainly an area where Denver really strove hard to see some improvements. On the front line, they still have Big Terrence Knight and Derek Wolfe. But I like them bringing over DeMarcus Ware. That really adds another dimension, not only being tough against the run, but if you look at him and Pro Bowl caliber pass rusher Von Miller teaming up, they really have an ability to bring some major heat off the edges in their blitz packages when it comes to rushing a passer. So I certainly like that. And then they went out in the secondary and improved that by bringing in Aqib Talib when healthy. Talib has certainly shown that he can be a shutdown cornerback. On the other side of him, Chris Harris will be back in the mix. Harris was a guy who went down early with an injury and missed most of last year. And then they went out and drafted Bradley Roby from defensive back from Ohio State. He'll have a lot of pressure coming in, but I think he couldn't be in a better situation to be on the job. He'll have more than his opportunities to defend the pass, as most teams are passing the ball to try to keep up with Denver. And you like veteran Chris Harris being there as well as Talib. On the back end, they also brought in TJ Ward, who was great for the Cleveland Browns last year. And you match him with Raheem Moore. And I certainly think this Denver Broncos team is very capable. And I certainly see a rematch between them and the and the Patriots in the AFC Championship game this year, unless something crazy happens. Moving on, I have the San Diego Chargers. Now, look, the Chargers played the Broncos very tough last year. They only lost by 10 points to Denver in the playoff game. They beat Denver last year in the regular season, and they went out and did some things themselves. Now, look, Phillip Rivers, when he was able to have time, which was a problem the year before, which caused him to have a lot of turnovers, last year Rivers cleaned all that up, threw for 32 TDs and only 11 interceptions. And that certainly is the Phillip Rivers that we've come to know over the years. And I'm quite sure that confidence being back, I expect for Rivers to have another big year. As far as running the football goes, he has guys like Ryan Matthews running the football. Matthews was able to put up over 1,200 yards as he was able to stay healthy for the first time in his career last year. So health is certainly going to be key for Matthews. You also have Danny Woodhead, who's a great back out of the backfield, had over 70 catches, can also run the ball effectively out of the shotgun. So you certainly like those two change of pace options for San Diego in the running game. When we look at what passing targets he has, Keenan Allen burst onto the scene last year as a rookie, had over 1,000 yards. He's certainly going to be the big play guy for Phillip Rivers in the passing game. I expect for him to have a huge year through the air. Vincent Brown will be the number 2 receiver. And then they'll be welcoming back Malcolm Floyd. Floyd is a veteran who's been with Rivers for a long time. Unfortunately suffered an injury and wasn't able to make it through last year. So you have 3 good passing options at wide receiver. At tight end, Antonio Gates, even though he's a little bit, has lost a step, still was able to haul in over 77 catches last year. So he'll be effective. And when they do go to tight end or he needs a break, young tight end Ladarius Green has a ton of upside, very fast, has looked excellent in training camp. So when you look at what Phillip Rivers has at his disposal on offense, including a very stout offensive line that features veteran Nick Hardwick, And then DJ Fluker is just a flat-out stud. Came in last year from University of Alabama, and you just seen this guy making plays all over the field. I mean, when you see an offensive tackle at 6'7", 330 pounds, out blocking in front of screens, downfield blocking safeties on running plays, you know that this guy has versatility, and I'm quite sure he stepped his game up in the offseason. So, I mean, from an offensive standpoint, San Diego certainly has everything in place to be a very good team and certainly challenge Denver for that top spot in the AFC West. When we look on the defensive side of the football, the Chargers just have to be more consistent. You have Corey Legent, who had an excellent rookie year, tapered off a tad bit last year. Kendall Reyes is another guy who's good. Manti Te'o, the linebacker they picked up last year from Notre Dame. He was kind of the Johnny Manziel of last year. Came in with all the hoorah and off the field issues as far as stuff that he did on Twitter and comments that he made. This year, obviously, that's not an issue. So hopefully he's flown under the radar with a year of experience under his belt. He should certainly be effective at linebacker. And a guy that I've really been waiting on to blossom is Melvin Ingram. Ingram certainly was a guy I had high up on my draft board when he came out a couple years. Just hasn't been able to do much as a rookie. You know, had his learning curve last year, missed a ton of games due to injury. So I certainly am looking for him to step up. He was a guy who was able to stop the run as well as be an effective pass rusher. You know, just a playmaker he was at South Carolina. So I'm certainly looking for him to pay some dividends. I really like what the Chargers did this year by bringing in Brandon Flowers. Flowers, a former Pro Bowler, was in Kansas City, so he'll be very familiar with the offenses in the AFC West. You know, he won't have to worry about being in a new division. Certainly should be able to bring over some secrets and some things when they do play Kansas City from being in that locker room. He's a tough guy, and he's out with a lot to prove. So I certainly like that addition. And then on the back end, you have Eric Weddle, one of the best safeties in the league, along with young Gilchrist, who certainly has been improving each year since he was drafted a couple years ago. So when I look at the San Diego Chargers team, if they can remain healthy, they'll definitely be very competitive, and they should be right there again in the postseason and have the potential as a team, if they can step up, to certainly be a big-time threat to possibly the Broncos or the Patriots. Next in line, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to be honest with you. Last year was a big-time aberration for the Kansas City Chiefs. I certainly don't expect for them to be a 13-3, 12-4 ball club again. I think 10-6, 9-7 is more the mark. The real calling card for them last year was their stout defense, and Jamal Charles just having a banner year with 19 touchdowns, and Alex Smith keeping the turnovers down. Now, look, they certainly had a recipe, so the confidence should be there, but I just don't see them duplicating that 13-3 record. Now, this is one of the main reasons why, and maybe things will change. Alex Smith, I have to give this guy credit. He certainly is a good NFL quarterback. 23 touchdown passes, 7 interceptions. Those are certainly numbers that you'd like to see. He doesn't make stupid mistakes, doesn't make silly turnovers, completes a high percentage of his passes, is effective in a short passing game, a good leader in the huddle. So I certainly don't have any knock on him. We know that Jamal Charles is an all-pro performer. We know what he brings to the board. Those wide receivers is where my concerns lie. Look, Dwayne Bowe is a guy who 3 years ago led the NFL with 15 TD passes. 2012, 2013, he just hasn't put up the numbers. He's just been flat out unproductive. He's going to have to find a way to change that around. You know, I don't know if he's lost his mojo. I don't know what it is that changed, but the production that he's put up has certainly been unacceptable, and you have to think that him and quarterback Alex Smith have found a way to try to change that around, because if Bo can be effective and be the playmaker that he was a couple years ago, then yeah, I think that 11-5, 12-4 mark certainly can be in reach, because you know the damage that Jamal Charles is going to do on the ground. When you look past Bo, your next best receiver is Donnie Avery. Now look, Avery, he has some talent. You know, he certainly showed potential when he was a rookie and in St. Louis. Obviously has battled injuries, but I can't quite say I'm sold on the guy who, you know, is kind of more of a downfield receiver and has problems catching the ball, but he certainly is effective. When you look past that, you have a lot of young players trying to fight for time in those 3 and 4 slots. Obviously, with Kansas City, this stout offensive line, number 1 draft pick Eric Fisher from a year ago, certainly should step his game up. You still have Hogs inside, Jeff Allen, and tackle Donald Stevenson. They certainly boast one of the best offensive lines in the football league. So this offense, I'm quite sure, is going to try to use the same recipe. But that defense certainly is capable. You know, they have the guys. I love Dontari Poe. Big defensive tackle. I love Justin Houston, that outside linebacker. I love Derek Johnson, inside linebacker. You got to love Tamba Ali and what he brings to the table. But losing Brandon Flowers could be a setback. They do still have Sean Smith. Marcus Cooper is a nice young defensive back. And you have Eric Berry in the back lines making plays in the running game, hitting receivers, jarring the ball loose, and making interceptions. But that defense was tops in the league last year at forcing turnovers and defensive touchdowns. And you just wonder, can they duplicate that this year? And if that defense somehow takes a step back or two, how would that affect the Chiefs' offense? But overall, I must say this is certainly a formidable team. And like last year, they certainly have an opportunity to be one of the 3 teams out of this division making the playoffs. Last but not least, you have the Oakland Raiders. And I think the Raiders are of huge interest and a huge enigma coming into the NFL season. We're certainly used to seeing a Raiders team that you expected no more than 4-12, 5-11 out of. But out of all the teams that made moves in the offseason, I don't know if anybody made more moves and brought in more proven veterans than the Oakland Raiders. Starting with quarterback Matt Schaub. Look, sometimes a fresh start is exactly what you need. They certainly won't be asking Schaub to pass for 4,000 yards and air it out, but he certainly can be effective in play action where he's comfortable. He can certainly still throw the ball. I think he's set up to have some success. If running back Darren McFadden can stay healthy, and that's a huge question mark. When McFadden was healthy and is healthy, we know he's one of the better running backs in the NFL, but you can't get him on the field long enough. So to shore that up, the Raiders went out and got veteran Maurice Jones-Drew from the Jacksonville Jaguars. You certainly have to like that pickup. Now you have some depth to hopefully take a little bit of the brunt off of McFadden. And if something does happen to McFadden, you do have a proven running back who can go out and get the job done. I'm quite sure Maurice Jones-Drew is looking to restore his reputation because that totally fell off in Jacksonville as he became very ineffective. When you look at the wide receiver position, you brought in James Jones from Green Bay. Now, I think this is a big question. He had Aaron Rodgers passing him the ball over there. And other weapons like Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb. And over the years, Donald Driver and Jermichael Finley. So when you have those weapons and one of the best quarterbacks in the league, certainly your numbers are going to stand out. Like I mentioned with Eric Decker in the Jets, he'll now come over here and be the number 1 target. So I'm wondering if he'll be able to put up that same production that he did in Green Bay. But with that being said, they do still have Denarius Moore, the speedy wide receiver, being his 4th year. He's certainly capable of putting up numbers. And the guy I really like, Rod Streeter, makes tough catches over the middle, can certainly make yards after the catch. So when I'm looking at this offense, if this offensive line and another guy, a veteran, proven Pro Bowler, they went out and got left tackle Donald Penn. You have, you still have Wesanowski at center. He's only in his 3rd year. He's certainly one of the better centers in the league. So I'm looking at if this Raiders offense can keep Darren McFadden healthy, if they can protect Matt Schaub, and they can be effective running the ball, I don't see any reason whatsoever that this Raiders offense cannot be a whole lot better than what we've seen in past years, especially if they can keep their turnovers down. And look, if they can do that, this defense is certainly in place to make some noise as well. Look, they brought in Justin Tuck, former Pro Bowler, 2-time Super Bowl winner from the New York Giants, to team up with him on the front lines. You have Antonio Smith. He's certainly a guy who's done a lot of good things in the NFL for the Houston Texans. You add to that equation LaMarr Woodley. You brought him over from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's certainly a guy, when healthy, who was very effective, tough. Coming out of that Dick LeBeau offense and playing for a guy like Mike Tomlin, he's got a lot of heart. He certainly looking to restore his reputation. He was one of the best pass rushers mentioned in the NFL a few years ago. You don't hear his name mentioned as much anymore. And then you also have Khalil Mack, the stud outside linebacker brought in from the University of Buffalo. If nothing else, this guy knows how to get after the passer. So, I mean, when you look at that front seven, they certainly have the pieces in place to be way more formidable than what they've been in last year. And with Tuck, Woodley, and Khalil Mack, you've got your hands full. You can't block all of these guys, so I certainly expect them to be able to put some pressure on the quarterback. Now, inside linebacker position is a position that they're going to have to address in the preseason. And when I look at their defensive backs, you certainly is another area that was upgraded. Look, DJ Hayden is a cornerback. They drafted from Houston last year. Missed a lot of time to injury. Had a learning curve. He's certainly a guy that he should be a lot better this year. Then they went out and got 2 free agents from the San Francisco 49ers. They brought in Carlos Rogers and Terrell Brown. When you look at both of these cornerbacks, they come from winning programs. The 49ers have been to 3 straight NFC championship games. And they just moved not too far along the Bay Area, so they should still be very comfortable. These are veteran players who can certainly help step in and help Hayden and be the starting number 2 and nickel cornerback for this Raiders team. And then when you look at the safeties, Tavon Branch is a guy who certainly has proven his worth, been a Pro Bowler in the NFL, sure tackler, can defend. And even though Charles Woodson has lost a step, still has great instincts, still is a playmaker that you have to respect. So when I'm looking at this Raiders team, all of a sudden I'm saying to myself, if they can stay healthy, if they can play smart football, if what I see on paper can translate over to the football field, I would not be shocked at all to see the Raiders possibly overtake Kansas City and be the 3rd team to make the playoffs. But one thing's for sure, if they don't make the playoffs, I certainly expect at least a 500 team or a 9-7 team. If the Raiders cannot be fighting for a playoff spot with the talent and the players that I see on this roster, I don't think they'll ever be able to get it done. So when the smoke clears, I got the Broncos winning the division. I think 13-3 as the calling card there. I certainly think San Diego's an 11-5 team. And like I said, I certainly think the Raiders as well as Kansas City can be right there at the end, knocking at the door with a 9-7 record, hoping to get in the playoff hunt. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the show. Again, this was the final wrap. I am your host, the NFL Exporter, Lance Goodman. Remember to watch us each and every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on DerekShapiroShow.com. You all have a great week. Enjoy the first week of preseason games, and I certainly look forward to seeing you next week when we'll do the same thing and break down the NFC division by division. Signing off.